So welcome, thanks for joining us for this Smarter Healthcare webinar. It's part of our Sharp Smart Academy. We're excited to delve into a critical topic for this webinar, overcoming waste challenges on the route to net zero. Waste can be a challenging area to navigate, and it's a facet of healthcare that can also significantly impact your carbon footprint. And in today's discussion, we'll be sharing some expert tips, some waste insights, and they'll help you to create strategies to help achieve sustainability goals within your facility. We'll be exploring solutions for common waste management challenges, the power of reuse and reduction, some updates on ERIC data, and more. And joining us, we have Sumal and Shane McAteer. So if we could start with a brief round of introductions of you guys and an overview of your experience, and then we'll dive straight in.
I'll go first. My name's Sumal. I've been with Sharp Smart for 5 years. My previous experience was working in facilities management with the NHS. I managed the national total waste account management, so I manage all the total waste contracts. I also sort of look after the consultancy side of the business, and Rule Free, one of our sites that we manage facilities management.
My name's Shane McAteer. I've been in the waste industry for over 15 years. I've been chartered waste manager for just over 10 years. I'm quite relatively new to Sharp Smart as one of the program managers, but I've previously worked for pharmaceutical companies, NHS organisations and universities managing healthcare waste, certainly early on in my career.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. Thanks for your time today. So let's kick it off straight with the meaty question of what are some of the most common waste management challenges you see hospitals facing today?
Well, Josh, I think one of the first and most common challenges from doing visits around these trusts is the challenge around space, particularly waste storage space within waste holds. We've certainly experienced this recently with a couple of trusts, and the way that we look at this problem, because it's such a common one, is unfortunately the devil is in the detail. Standardization of collections across the estate doesn't usually work. What we're looking to do with our customers is to align collection resource as closely as possible to waste generation, which means we actually need to understand more about how waste is generated around the trust, in terms of priority areas such as your ED and A&E, high volume areas and low volume areas, and actually starting to align the collection resource to that. It's not a case of every waste hold requires the same amount of resource. It's very much the opposite of that. It's where do we allocate the resource to get the most effective collection program. The problem is not the waste and the weight of the waste at the end, it's the management of the volume to enable correct segregation locally, and then getting the benefit of that correct segregation in terms of the reduced cost from the likes of recycling and offensive waste streams, and also the benefit of improved sustainability outcomes through better, or I suppose, disposal aligned to the waste hierarchy. Once you've got those containers in place, obviously having standardization with regards to posters and training and looking at how we set up these local waste stores is also really, really important. So that suite of materials that people need to aid segregation, very much aligned to the role of the staff. So what do domestic staff need, what do waste porters need, and aligning that education material to those individuals doing those jobs. I think that's really, really important. And then I suppose looking at the setup of these waste stores in terms of, again, the highest volume waste streams, actually thinking about how do we set this up to enable fast collections or efficient collections of the highest volume waste streams, again with one eye on trying to prevent contamination or mixing of waste within the building. It's not easy to do. It requires quite a lot of data gathering and engagement with the people locally, the departments that use those waste holds or those waste storage areas, and then coming up with a plan that then can be resourced by the team that's there to do that job. But we have had success doing that in a number of different trusts.
Yeah, I think what I love with what Change has gone through is understanding each aspect is so important. I think quite often you look at it as a simple challenge. You want to increase the amount of recycling you make, but actually you do need to get into the nitty gritty and understand it and understand where it's falling down. And I think, like we mentioned, education is really, really important. And what you find when you look around a hospital is it's almost information overload. Those posters are all over the walls that have been there for years. you say, have you not seen that poster? And they'll go, no, because they're doing it day in, day out. They don't look at the poster. So some of the activities we've been working on is making them really, really clear. It started by us talking about actually painting the walls physical colours of orange and tiger, so people couldn't miss it, and found that realistically we weren't allowed to just paint the walls. So we end up doing the next best option, which was massive posters. So we've put a lot of A1 posters up in some of these hospitals where you really can't get it wrong unless you want to get it wrong, because the poster is really, really clear. And I think from an education standpoint, what we realise is trust, obviously, they have a lot of training that needs to be done. Health and safety needs to be completed. Information governance and waste training is one of those in that list. And you look at how often they're renewed, and a lot of trusts renew them every 3 years. And the honesty is people are trying to do this as a bit of a tick box. They need to get their compliance up, and each department's tasked to be at 100%. The training gets done. Does it really go in? Is it reinforced? Is it looked at, year on year to provide any updates? The HTM has been updated, but actually, has anyone's training been updated? Probably not. So the courses are quite old, potentially. There's lack of focus if it's over 3 years, and trying to find ways of engagement staff is really important. So we've done a lot of waste quizzes, really, really quick bite-sized chunks. Scan a QR code. You can do it in your own time when it's quiet on your phone. But the reality is, you've got to have a combination of this. You have the right education material on the wall, so at point of use they can see it. You've got to have the foundation, which is your core e-learning or waste training package that keeps their compliance up, and little micro-size training sessions to reinforce the problem areas when you find it. So it is looking at the whole piece, and then that links exactly to what Shane said, is looking at each of those pieces and the individuals, and not making a one-size-fits-all. A domestic and a porter will need similar training, but not the same training. And you've really got to look at what the needs are and deliver that to get the best outcome.
I can agree more. So I think also, when we're developing these training tools, always linking it back to that waste policy, isn't it? That foundation of guidance around how to be compliant across the trusts, and using that tool, if you like, to then identify the roles and responsibilities and who's responsible for what around delivering that policy, and then having those training resources allocated to those roles and responsibilities, really, really important. Without all of this stuff, we do see that there are segregation problems, of course. A very common one that we see is challenges around the management of medicinal waste, IV lines, glass bottles, those sorts of items that may or may not end up in the correct medicinal or sharp streams. So one of the things that we look at when we see these is partly a product of the annual pre-acceptance audit. Obviously, a lot of these audits are done. Only a third of the hospital every year is done, which causes a bit of a barrier. So we also do, or look to do, more frequent audits and trends audits of these waste streams to say, where are the problems, how common are those problems, and how can we actually intervene? And a lot of it goes back to what we were previously talking about, is how do we educate? Who do we need to educate? Are we getting the right information to the right people in the right format for that information and that message to be delivered? And once it's been delivered, are we actually then monitoring success of any change that we've actually delivered? It's all right putting medicinal boxes or containers into ward areas to capture these items, but is it successful? And often these things are rolled out and it's like, job done, tick, thanks very much. We always need to go back and keep that program voicing going as much as you possibly can. Again, resource is always a challenge with these things, but what we have seen is often pre-acceptance orders are done because of the legal requirement, and that's always sort of done. Thanks very much, job done. Where's the action plan off the back of these pre-acceptance audits, and how is that change driven and managed across the estate to make sure that these organisations are continuously improving? Training and segregation is obviously a big problem for any trust, but I think it's made worse by turnover of staff, different cultures, different language barriers, and these sorts of things. So having mandatory training as part of induction programs, ensuring that there is a standard evidenced by the waste policy, and that we're all leading, everyone understands their role in delivering that. Anything else to add around sort of, we could go on about segregation problems all day, couldn't we? But
I think just a couple of bits on the few points you said, which are really interesting, is what I find is that there are a lot of staff who are really passionate about trying to do the right thing, and they're trying to recycle. And I'd say when you were talking about medicinal glass in the domestic waste or in the recycling bins, I found them, it's they're glass to them, right? So they're trying to be helpful and they want to recycle it and they can't be thrown away, but they don't understand that it's got medicinal properties in it. And that's why understanding the waste hierarchy and how things should be treated is really, really important, because they're trying to do the right thing because they want to recycle it and they don't want it to go in the wrong stream, and it's glass, we can do something about it. And then that causes that sort of challenge there. And yeah, I agree that putting solutions in can be quite easy and it's a tick box, but it's actually how do you monitor that and make sure what you've put in is the right fit solution and it does continue is very, very important. One other bit I think just interesting, I know it's been a discussion topic with some of my customers, is again, is like we're saying, we've got a wide group of staff and they rotate around hospitals and they move between different hospitals, and it's how can you standardize what we actually do across the NHS. I know the NHS are looking, example, to standardize uniforms. So the reason they're looking to do that is so when the staff, when members of the public go in, the staff all look the same. They understand every hospital's got a different structure, different uniform color. You're not really sure. And when you think about it, for example, recycling. Well, recycling hospital, I see green bags for recycling and I see clear bags for recycling. And then I see clear bags for domestic waste, so I see black bags. And you can imagine if you're a staff member and you're going into different hospitals, why is it different? If it's different, of course, it's going to be confusing. And yeah, it might seem straightforward that, when you're working in waste, that's obviously what the waste streams are, but it's those little touches that if we made them consistent across the NHS, would that improve? Because once you've done that training at the front end, any hospital you go to, using the same bag. So it's lots of interesting topics there to definitely digest.
In terms of any other sort of waste streams that you've seen that are becoming challenges for these trusts, Sumal?
Yeah, so
comes to mind?
I think there's a few. I mean, I think there's obviously always some changes and what new focuses in the industry. I think a couple of the ones that have come up recently, for example, is disposal of vapes. So it's been a real interesting topic discussing with different trusts and seeing their opinions on it. So obviously vape usage is increasing. The NHS are actively pushing members of the public to move away from smoking to vaping, with the aim of then moving from vaping to not smoking. So obviously we have a lot more people using vapes around hospitals, and obviously the natural issue is the disposal. So I've seen lots of articles recently of refuse collection vehicles on fire and disposal sites on fire from fires from vapes. Again, they contain lithium batteries, highly flammable, and obviously if high quantities are going in, there's massive risk. So again, I think every hospital needs to be aware that your compactor in the backyard could be a fire risk. It always has been, but actually you could be putting items in there that when compacted could combust and you could have a fire. So again, it's been a real focus for some trusts. Some have had fires in the wards, again from patients who have using vapes and they've caught on fire. So they're well aware and they're looking at solutions. But the real challenge for them is obviously they're non-smoking sites, so they're not trying to promote smoking. And how can you have vape bins in place but not promote smoking? So again, some are looking at, can we get them delivered to the reception areas or to the front, the front of departments basically, so they're not in the corridors. And then again, the whole disposal process, what you find is there is some lack of awareness and of how they should be packaged. We would recommend a plastic barrel, packed with layers of vermiculite. And when you explain this, I mean, normally when I say the word vermiculite to some people, they look at you like you're not sure what you're talking about. And so again, back to education and understanding. You've got streams like this, and how do you package it? Batteries in general have always been a challenge, across the industry. But actually understanding that you've got to split your NiCad batteries from your lithium batteries and package them up, and next thing you know, you've got 6 different barrels for each battery stream, and training the staff are putting in there. So I think batteries have been a massive focus recently, and something that people are definitely focusing on and trying to find the best solution. I think POPs waste has been a massive one that's obviously come in probably 18 months ago now, if I'm honest. It came in sort of tail end Christmas time. And it's changed what people dispose of. Obviously POPs waste is anything with sort of cushioning on them, and when you say that, and at first I looked at it, I was like, well, I mean, that's pretty much most of what comes out the NHS these days. You know, there's so many seats. Obviously, infection control. If there's a rip, it's coming out the door. There's lots of requirements in terms of how you dispose and separate and handle POPs waste. A lot of these sites don't have the infrastructure to put multiple skips in, so we've had to look at alternative collections or consigning everything as POPs waste, so it can increase costs. So there's lots of factors to be sort of considering in terms of longer term planning for estates. So I've said to a number of trusts that are looking at waste yards, you're going to need more space. That's the reality. We're only going to start segregating more and more streams. You know, think about that cardboard baler having a position. Even if you don't want it right now, at some point you might need that power hookup ready to put in a cardboard baler. Don't just think about space for 2 compactors, put space for 3 compactors, just in case you might want to compact your offensive waste in the future. So lots to consider in terms of longer term infrastructure. And I think that's why the clinical waste strategy has been so important, giving all the trust a clear target of what they're trying to achieve. So now it's the time to about setting up the infrastructure and making sure that they have everything to separate all these streams in the most cost effective and environmentally friendly way.
I think POPs is a really interesting one as well, because if we really want to prevent POPs waste, it comes down to procurement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Knowing what you're buying, knowing where it's coming from, doing those checks, because ultimately, if you don't know if it's not POPs, it is POPs, which is one of the biggest problems that you say that leads to huge increases in volume of the bulky waste stream, because now it's all classified as POPs, so we don't know if it isn't. So I think that's when you look at the targets and the direction of travel, like you say, space is only getting tighter, not bigger, but you're absolutely right. I totally agree that the planning needs to include the requirement for future segregation. But I think we also need to, it's a good example of where prevention can happen if those conversations are happening and if the procurement teams are informed and they're not looking at cost of products purely based on item or unit rates. It's the total cost, including disposal, and POPs is one that the difference in cost is quite significant per ton. So taking that into account when you're buying new furniture, or we're shortly going to be talking about reuse, I think that principle applies as well, and could be one of the challenges to not reusing stuff that's in perfectly good condition if it may be POPs or people don't know that it is. So yeah, I think finally we'd be remiss of us not to talk about offensive waste as one of the most common challenges that our trusts are facing at the moment. Everyone's very aware of the 2020 60 targets, and trusts are on that journey. I'm not going to talk about the logistical challenges that we've already mentioned, but I think one of the common challenges that we have is quite simply, in a post-pandemic world, when you're looking to move away from a precautionary approach to infection or infectious waste management to a certain extent, people believe and still feel that they have to protect themselves at all times. It goes down to you're wearing the gloves and how much PPE is still being used out there, and it's trying to change that perception of, or that understanding of transmission of infection. And I think it goes back to the roles and responsibilities and how to do your job safely and how to do that training piece, because it's definitely a barrier for trusts in driving forward that offensive waste stream. I think it's that sort of default position, isn't it, of being precautious around it.
Of course.
But then the infection control teams obviously need to be engaged and really understand why we need to be doing these things, why do we need to change, what's the benefit of it, and how does it actually improve, I suppose, reducing risk. I'm a big believer that actually if we're mixing streams significantly, that putting hand towels into a clinical waste stream or putting hand towels into an offensive waste stream actually dilutes what we believe or see these hazardous waste streams as being. So it's managing every stream, understanding how what hazards are present within those streams, and trying to work with the producers to understand where's the risk and am I actually doing the right thing. And I suppose a lot of it comes down to evidence as well, doesn't it? Where's the evidence to prove that this person isn't infectious or the waste coming from them isn't infectious? So, the infection control teams and the procedures around introducing offensive waste or keeping it as orange is an area that certainly needs more work, certainly in my experience from introducing offensive. I'm sure you've also add to that, Sumal.
No, I totally agree. I think it's trying to get everybody on board and understanding the streams. I think there's still a lot of confusion again with some of the quizzes we've done. looking at the results, that the simple question of, is this orange bag infectious or non-infectious, or the offensive bag, you normally find a 50-50 split sometimes. So again, it's people not fully understanding. I think also people understanding the treatment process. I think that's the other bit. I think the amount of times I still hear these days that, the general waste is going to landfill. No, it's not. It hasn't been going to landfill for quite a while in the NHS. I'm sure some does, but again, the volume is quite low now. Them understanding that everything goes to incineration. No, it doesn't. And then, when you get into nitty gritty and you start talking different temperatures for cytotoxic, etc., they're like, oh, I didn't realize it was that complicated. And I think that is the point, isn't it? So it is quite complicated. So sometimes people just feel safer by putting it in this higher stream because they feel like it's going to be treated better, or it's going to have this, or actually there's, or I'd rather put it in recycling just to risk it because I don't want it to go to landfill, but actually it's going to waste for energy, and you don't have recycling because you're putting so much in the recycling that it isn't recycling, so everything's going for waste for energy. So it's trying to make sure. And I think trusts do struggle in trying to maybe be open. I think sometimes it's quite, people don't want to turn around and say we're not recycling potentially because they feel like they'll get a backlash. But actually, I think I've done a lot of work in trying to really educate people. We've taken people to material recycling facilities to actually see it for real. The amount of times I get asked where this little tiny piece of plastic, for example, could be recycled, and you take them to the facility, they see the size, they see the machinery, and they understand that there's a reason why there's a focus in certain areas. The reason they want cans and bottles because it's a commodity, and the machines are designed to pick these items out. Everything can, in theory, be recycled, but whether it can be recycled at your local facility is a different question. So really understanding where your waste is going, what the facility can offer and what they can do. No means don't push these facilities to do more and find ways to do it, but you've got to understand where your back end is and make sure you support them by giving them the waste in the best way. So I think, it's really, really important understanding all aspects.
Brilliant. Thank you both. That was some real gems there throughout those common challenges that we see. Moving slightly up the waste hierarchy now then, from landfill and so on, and recycling, let's look at the power of reuse, and why implementing reuse programs for medical equipment and supplies. How can that be beneficial for achieving net zero? What sort of reuse options are there out there? What can people make more use of in this regard?
Yeah, Josh, I think again it's a great point, and I think that's the key. We've got to move everything up the hierarchy. I'd say there's a lot of reduction that needs to happen. I think procurement, are doing some great work, but I think that's where the focus really needs to be. A lot of the time, I look at what's disposed of in a hospital, and I always say it's got to come in somewhere and it's got to go out the other end. And the focus is always, how can you reduce our waste, reduce our costs, reduce how much we're throwing away? And I said, look, we don't make the waste. You make the waste. We can try to put it in the best stream possible to get it out the door. But actually, have you ever been to your loading bay and seen all the boxes that come in, all the stock, all the packaging, all the wrap and everything for it? So, you look at any local supermarket these days, you've seen the innovation in terms of what they're trying to do to reduce packaging. I think my local avocados have gone from, cardboard box, from a plastic box with packaging and everything into it. Now they're in a little neat cardboard packet. So, it's all happening within, these industries where they're trying to reduce the packaging that's been used. And the same needs to happen in the NHS. They really need to push their suppliers to find efficiencies. With some of the suppliers we work with, for example, for waste bags, they've modified boxes to increase the capacity of how many can fit in a box. And you look at those small changes, but actually, if you're getting 18 rolls instead of 10 rolls into a box, well, actually that box isn't that much bigger because they've been more efficient with it. You're saving all that cardboard waste. I mean, the amount of cardboard that comes out of the NHS is just absolutely huge. In how much of that ends up, like we were saying, in the general waste stream because it doesn't get segregated correctly. So, is there real targets to really reduce what comes in, but B, what's the process to get this cardboard from point of production into a cardboard baler, off to be reused to be made into more cardboard, and in theory for a trust some rebates back from that cardboard, and that's going to offset their waste costs. So definitely a big focus on reducing what's coming in. Reuse, again, a massive one for me. I implemented a reuse scheme a number of years ago. It came in quite naturally at a great time. We were about to build a brand new hospital at the trust I worked at. And we had to clear this whole hospital out. And I was looking around, and it was almost like, whoa, I need that table, or I could do with that chair. And staff in the NHS are brilliant. And, I've, working in there, for the last 15 years or so, they will always repair. There's books under table legs. There's some ancient tables. They'll always find a way of reusing stuff. There's some great people out there, and actually, I was about to see some tables that are better than what they had been thrown out, while they're sticking another piece of paper to stop the table leg wobbling. So looked at a reuse system. We managed to implement it. And everybody was kids in a candy shop, because they were going to a website and they could see all the items. It took a lot of resource, and I think the NHS, you're only going to get what you put in. So it's a bit like an eBay. So you're going to have someone to take the photos, put the descriptions in, get the sizes. Got all sorts of questions. I need a left-handed desk, a right-handed desk. If you got that one in, that light grey colour, it will fit my office better. So turned into IKEA for a couple of weeks, but it was amazing to do it. And then was the logistic plan to get these items to deliver between different departments, or between the different hospital sites. And actually, when we looked at the costings initially, it was scary to put resource in and put manpower to move things around. But actually, when procurement said, hey, we spend this much on desks and tables and chairs a year, and you looked at, well, actually, I could get a van load of that delivered in. And when we started looking into it, obviously there were other trusts doing projects, and we were able to put some of our items and for them to take it and us to take other items. So it is amazing. That I think the way I always put it was, the NHS has already spent this money. The money has been spent to buy these things at some point, and everybody makes some sort of mistake in terms of how much they order. We've all done it, right? I mean, I've ordered, I think, 100 pack of labels, but with 100 boxes of labels. I've done it before. Wasn't sure what I was ordering, ordered the wrong things, but they get hidden in a cupboard. And I think what we did was we promoted everybody to do a bit of an amnesty. We did a bit of a check your drawers, tell me what you've got. 15 staplers, 27 rulers, 27 pairs of scissors, and it was. We were in a point where we were trying to save money as an organisation, and by empowering everybody to put these on, and you're sharing your kit out. And we had some open days where it was almost bring your own, bit of a car boot sale, and it was like I had my staplers and I've got my scissors, and I'm trading a scissor for one of those little things you can get the paper clips out. No, it's the hole punching, not the hole punch, the stapler bits out. One of those little hooky things. They were brilliant. So you're there, you're getting your bits, you leave with your box of, I've got rid of my staplers, I didn't need those, didn't need a ruler, and you walk away with your stuff, and everyone loved it. So I think it's massively important, and you'd be surprised what one NHS hospital, if they looked at drawers, they looked in their storage cupboards, how many envelopes, paper, labels, everything is in there. And actually, you don't have to have a massive system to do reuse. Just get your atrium space or whatever you've got, get everyone to bring it down, share the stuff out, and you're reusing. You can get this stuff out there. So yeah, massive things that can be done.
That's great examples. That I think one of the things that is a bit of a barrier to reach, or we could actually, as waste organisations, waste companies, actually, we've got a really important role in supporting these organisations and identifying that true cost. Because it's great doing these things, but we want to be able to show the benefit of it. Yeah. When we talk about changing behaviour and developing culture, it is around that sort of positive feedback, isn't it? Building that momentum following some change to behaviours to keep it going, and working with trusts to actually understand, what the weight of these items, what is the volume of these items, where would it have ended up, and what would have that cost been, and trying to capture all of that data. I'm not saying there's a solution out there at the moment to do that. Certainly there are organisations that attempt to do that, but I think as an industry, we've got a lot. Big data is here. It's only going to become more valuable. It's only become more accurate. And when everyone sort of gets their head around sort of carbon emission reporting, etc., we can get to that point where there's true costs of purchase and there's true costs of reduction and reuse. And I think it's that that's really going to help drive the thinking in line with the waste hierarchy, which we all take trusts from the bottom up, but it was designed as a top-down approach. we should be doing these things first, but yet there are gaps in our ability to make that business case or convince organizations that reuse and elimination are the first things we should be thinking about and looking at. But often day to day takes over, and arranging that pop skip to get off and get emptied is often more important, isn't it, in the moment. But I think this is where the longer term strategy and using that information, that data to build profiles of different products and working very closely with procurement is going to transform the reuse capability and the elimination capability of the NHS moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, Shane, like you're saying, that we've got so many good systems in the NHS to track what they deliver to a ward, what they're. I mean, they know everything in terms of what they deliver, what they order, what gets delivered where, and I think it's but do they understand the back end of where does it go? If you looked at an organisation and said, well, how many hand towels do you order a year? Actually, you could quantify what that weight is, and actually where's that weight going? There's a big push now to obviously try to move hand towels away from recycling and get them into general waste, because again, people have been trying to recycle them for a long time because they think they are, but actually they're end of life. And again, this is what I said about supporting your facilities and making sure you're putting the right items in for them. And people are worried, oh, my costs are going to go up. So actually, trying to quantify what these changes are. But actually, if we diverted this from the general waste into recycling, you're going to save this much. If you diverted your cardboard, you can get a rebate. If you looked at your metal recycling and you got this off to a metal recycler, you might get a rebate. You might get a free of charge collection. So it's really trying to understand everything they produce. But obviously, stock management's really important. I think there's been great steps in that in terms of not over ordering time, just in time delivery and everything, which has been great. But there's still waste, and there needs to be a focus on procurement and the teams to try to reduce that best they can.
Brilliant. And speaking of keeping track and big data being here, I'm of the understanding that there's been some changes to the ERIC data and how that will be reported, which will affect next year's report, or this year's report, which will be put through next year. So did you want to walk us through those, please?
Yeah, sure. Shane, do you want to start, or you want me to?
Yeah, sorry. So I suppose one of the first things that's been included in the ERIC data is their full-time waste manager. So this is something that the clinical waste strategy dictated or suggested, I suppose, more accurate description, that every trust should have a full-time or half a full-time employee in place by the end of 2023. Certainly, we're aware of trusts that are still not employed that full-time or half a full-time person's worth of resource. So I think it's something that we're talking about all this work and all this energy and all this commitment that's required to not have that full-time or half-time person in place is a big problem. That is one of the first things that's going to be included in the ERIC data. So next year we'll be able to see, or this next submission we'll be able to see what progress the trusts have made in that respect.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's a great move for the organisations. I think waste is potentially something that's always been bundled with other areas, and there's potentially lack of focus in that area. So it's good to see the commitment to have someone dedicated to waste to really drive some of these projects forward. It shows that it's important to the NHS and obviously to trying to meet these targets. Again, with the ERIC data, Josh, in our conversations, it's an evolving system. I think every year that there's going to be a few tweaks and new learning. I think when we look at it, we go back to what are they trying to achieve, and I think it's trying to be able to benchmark NHS Trust to see the trends and understand where things are working well, where things are not working so well. And so I think data accuracy has been really, really important. And I think one of the struggles, with people with something as complex as ERIC data reporting is truly understanding what the questions actually are asking, the different waste streams. And I think by having a dedicated waste manager, you've got a person who's going to be owning that data for the organisation to say, hey, what I'm submitting is accurate. Quite too often, I'm sure data's been taken in some areas that there might not be some verification process for it. Again, in recent years, I've seen with NHS England that they're asking for early submission for the ERIC data for waste this year, and then they come back to organisations and say, can you double check your data because your percentage has gone up 11,000% this year. So it's great that they're actually checking it, because quite often I've seen the data and gone, well, that just can't be right. Or if it is right, you've done amazing. So I think it's really good that they're focusing now. Again, new sections have come through. So again, there's a dedicated food waste section, again showing how important food waste management is for the organisations. Again, they've still kept the food waste disposal element within the waste section, but there's a whole separate section for food waste, for management of food waste and items such as food scrapings. Again, it's showing where there's a real target here to get the reporting data for unserved meals or expired stock. So again, back to this reuse and making sure we're not creating waste. Actually, if there's a lot of expired meals being thrown away, you need to reduce your stock. So again, I've said to a lot of organisations who are looking at, oh no, Eric are asking for this, is just make sure what you put in process wise works for you in terms of what you're going to do with this data. The data they're asking is for high level reporting, but actually this data you're collecting, how will it help you as an organization? And if you get your focus on that to start with you're not just trying to capture data for data's sake, you're trying to capture it because you're trying to reduce your unserved meals, you're trying to reduce your plate scrapings, then put your system into monitoring, because it does get quite complex. And I'm not sure anyone's going to have the perfect solution for every hospital, because every hospital is different. But hey, imagine at home you're trying to tell the wife, for example, to separate the spoiled food from the expired food and the plate scrapings and the what the kids didn't eat, and you need to have a separate bin for each, and you need to weigh it. Just think about it. And that's what I thought to myself, how would I do it at home? How would I have to have different coloured bins to separate it and be like, well, kids didn't eat their toast, that needs to go in one bin. Okay, well, no, didn't eat those bananas before they went out, they need to go. So you try to take that in a grand scale into a hospital, and you think to yourself, wow, this is a real complex task, and they need to take a lot of planning and management to make that happen. So I said to a lot of trusts and working with a few is, don't rush into it and make it wrong and you've got the wrong infrastructure. Really try to think about how your process works. Where do you produce your food? Is it steamed, prepared, microwave sort of food, or is it chilled regen food up on the ward? What's your process from A, B, and C? How will you get it down? Where will you be able to weigh it? Do you have weighing scales? Do you have caddies? Do you have what systems do you have? And so that's what's really going to drive that importance in the data side for food waste. But again, keep in heart what you're trying to do is reduce the amount of food waste you produce. So a great area that everyone's working on. Other areas they've obviously improved accuracy of waste reporting. So again, something that historically has just been a pound sign. That's been how much did it cost you. What they've tried to do is add some tonnages to that. The complexity is obviously sometimes there aren't tonnages for your waste, so they've put some factors together to calculate what that waste weight would be. But again, this is where it goes back to that waste manager. These are complex things you're asking, so it's you need to factor that. It was a 60-litre battery bin, and you got rid of 10 of those, and do your calculation to come out with how much battery waste you produce, or was it a 1100 IBC, and what was the outcome? So there's some actual maths involved in calculating these ERIC returns at the end of the year and understanding what your process is. So it's good that these are coming in, and people now understand, well, it's not just the cost, it's also the weights, and if I don't have the weight, I need to calculate the weight. So it's really, really good that there's focus there. Some other changes again was splitting cost across different streams. So example, these are items like consignment notes and transport, these sort of other costs that hit multiple waste streams, but actually sometimes they sat in the other cost section, so you didn't really get a true reflection. So again, it was trying to look at splitting costs across different streams to get an accurate number of what that stream costs. So there was some assumed weights for different size sharps bins. In previous days, you've seen trust use a number that they've dictated as their average, and therefore their calculations factored by that number. And again, what we talked about right at the beginning, standardizing. If you're going to do that, let's have a standardized number so we can compare apples and apples, not apples and pears. So it's really, really good to see the different focus across ERIC data, and yeah, it should provide some great accuracy. I'm excited to see the return later this year and see how all the trusts have performed and the changes.
Yeah, it'll definitely be exciting to see how that comes together. And like you say, as an ever evolving piece, to see how that's going to become more and more accurate and just help people make those better decisions going forward. Yeah, it is exciting. Well, here we are at the final hurrah. the Q&A section. So we've just got a few questions to run through with you both. So the first one to kick this off is how often should a waste audit be conducted?
I'll take this one. So a pre-acceptance audit is annually, depending on whether it's the first audit that a trust is doing. Usually they would have had previous audits, but it's the first audit with a new company. An organisation might choose to do the whole site. It's really helpful to do that, to have a baseline to work from. So where possible and resources allowing, it's definitely worth doing that from the start. And then building that action plan, as we said, to then drive forward projects to support the continuous improvement program that the trust should be looking to achieve. Often the pre-acceptance only covers a third of the hospital. Now, if the previous two pre-acceptance audits have not delivered any outcomes, then you could be in a position where you're auditing an area as sort of fresh, but yet the rest of the trust still hasn't moved on. So I think it's audits are great only if there's outcomes and usable information off the back of them. Auditing for auditing's sake is, quite frankly, a bit of a waste of money and time and effort. And I suppose a key thing from our perspective is like I say, there's your evidence. What do we do with it? How do we use it to engage and inform decision making? How do we use it to engage and inform the waste producers to change their behaviours? How do we use these audits to prioritise projects that we're looking to do with these trusts? And it all stems from that first audit. I think in terms of more frequent audits, yes, you can put together a program where you're auditing every area once a year or once a month, depending on how much resource you have. But I think, again, it has to be impactful, it has to be useful outcomes. So what's probably a better way to look at this problem is to actually prioritise the audits across the organisation. Who are the highest waste producers of certain streams? And let's break this problem down into manageable chunks and audit specific areas, specific streams in specific areas, and then taking action from that, which then allows you to deliver a positive outcome for the trust and then move the agenda forward. And I suppose learn from those findings, learn from that success from delivering change. It only improves, I suppose, enables, shall I say, the ability to change behaviour, which leads to changing the culture within the organisation. And if people have found that they've had their audit, they've changed something, they've had some success, and they're being recognised for that, then they are then the people that then drive further change across the organisation as well. So there's no sort of hard line on how often you should audit, but I think it's about understanding what the purpose of the investment in auditing time is that you're going to do, and then prioritising it aligned to your overarching strategy. And there isn't one size fits all. I think we have to be focusing on the big hitters, the big opportunities first, and then using those successes to standardise practice across the trust after that.
Brilliant, thank you. Our next question is, how important is data tracking and analysis in optimising waste management practices?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Josh. So I think, just again, going off the back of what Shane was going through with auditing, again, auditing's brilliant and, it can drive some great change, but it's how you're tracking that data. So, one of the things I always say is that if you audit a number of departments and you're not tracking that data, you don't get to see the trends. What you'll find is even your natural auditor who does it will find that if you audit 10 departments and you've got 8 departments that have got the same problem, you've probably got a problem across the rest of the hospital. You can already drill in from that point there. If there's a problem that's regular enough, it's going to be a trend across your hospital. And actually being able to track that data to then see, well, what are we going to do about that problem, and then how do we go back and follow up an audit to show that we've actually fixed that problem. So again, data tracking analysis is really important. I think quite often, now the data's available, people don't focus in terms of the impact of what they've been able to do. I know Shane's done some great projects recently where he's really driven offensive waste numbers, and I know how keen Shane was to see the live numbers come in to see the impact of the work he's done. And I think that's where the outcome it can be seen. So I think data tracking is really important. If you don't have your benchmark and you don't know where you're starting, you don't understand your trend of your problem, when you do go out and try something, you don't know if it works, and therefore you might be, well, a bit disheartened. You don't get your budget to make that big change you want to do. So I think tracking your baseline, that's probably from your start of your audits or whatever you're trying to analyze, being very, very clear, like Shane said, of having a plan to make a change and then be able to make that change, look at the data. Did it make a positive impact? Was it working? Great, let's go elsewhere. And sometimes it can look too big to go and try to fix a whole hospital or a whole site or the 50 problems you have found. So sometimes it's, like Shane is saying, like, what is the big hitters? What are the big problems? How do I demonstrate that's a trend, that's a problem? How do we fix it? And then how do we track the outcome to show, hey, we've increased our recycling, we've increased our offensive waste, we've decreased the number of compactor movements by optimizing schedules. So data is so important these days. But yeah, understand what your metrics are and what you're measuring and what the outcomes are.
Brilliant. So that's one side of the coin. Then the other side is that not many people wake up in the morning and think, today I'm going to go out to work and I'm going to be really passionate about waste. So on that, you found any successful ways to increase like staff enthusiasm for waste management to get people invested in that?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just talking there about the power of data. I think evidence is really important and making that evidence relevant. I think that my personal view is that as an industry, I think we've done a pretty bad job at selling the idea of climate change. Polar bears live a long way away, and it doesn't necessarily impact us as individuals every single day. But looking at ways that the data piece and even some of the more, I suppose, the softer approach, if you're working as an employee at your local hospital, that hospital is where you're going to take potentially your family. If there's an accident, you're going to go to this trust and you're going to actually use the services potentially that are being offered to you. So there's a clear sort of emotive purpose there for contributing towards the solution. If you're not part of the solution, you arguably maybe are part of the problem. So I think not just we've got evidence in terms of data, we've got an understanding of there's a personal responsibility to working with trusts to improve the outcomes and things like infection control and safety. That includes visitors, not just staff and patients. And then I suppose it's making an argument, making the right argument. And NLP or neuro-linguistic programming tells us that not everyone receives information in the same way. I know I'm a very visual person. I don't really like looking at data tables. I like looking at graphs as an example. Some people will be taken aback by having something described to them, just as another example. And it's about tailoring our message, the same message, but it's tailoring it to the right person in the right way. A director of a hospital is going to want information presented in a certain way, and somebody with equal importance in the organisation, domestic staff or a cleaner, they require the information delivered in a certain way, but it can still be the same message. And I think what we have started to do more and more and more is recognise that problem and actually try and tailor our communications and our training and that engagement piece to the audience. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can create an argument for the individual. I started talking about polar bears, so I'll just come back to that and say that, if we started talking to people about energy costs, how it affects you in the summer, you've got to put your aircon in your car on, and in the winter you've got to put your heaters up higher, so you're going to have higher fuel bills in your car. And the same goes with inside our homes. I've just started putting fans on, regrettably, because it's been quite hot recently, and then in the winter we'll have our heating up. If you're interested in gardening, there's a whole biodiversity in your garden challenge that you might have. Very, very real local problems that affect individuals. It takes a bit of time to really understand what I suppose those things are, but the more that we can make it personal, the more we can develop that sense of purpose with the individual, and hopefully get to a point through action, reward and recognition, we can get more people coming into work saying, actually, I want to do a good job today around waste and environment and health and safety and compliance.
I'll just add to that, Shane. I think, most staff in a hospital do want to do the right thing, right? And what you'll find quite often is they're doing the wrong thing because they don't understand that they are doing the wrong thing. And when you educate, they go, oh, I didn't know that, been here for 5 years and wasn't sure about this. or it's been made too complicated for them to do it, and they're so busy and they're under pressure, and they're going to use the nearest bin. I think the nearest bin is one of the biggest problems I see. It's like you ask the staff, they know where it needs to go, but that was the nearest bin, and that's where they were going to put it. And so I always try to look at the problem and say, you've got to make it easy for them to do the right thing. You can't, quite often before it was, well, actually, if I put this bin all the way over there and, one bin over here, and you make it difficult for them so they have to go and do it right, they won't. The reality is if you want them to make the right choice, give them the choices. 9 times out of 10, if you've got 3 bins in front of you, you'll probably use the right bin. But if you've got to go to a different room to go make that right choice, you're going to make the wrong choice, potentially. So it's really understanding where that is. And I think that's why getting really into the organization, understanding what their struggles and problems are, hearing the staff out. So they go, oh, I really need a bin here. And you can deliver that bin and you can put it for them and solve that problem for them, makes them more enthusiastic. Oh yeah, we'll make sure we segregate that now. You've given us the tool. So it's trying to take away from policing, right? Nobody wants to be policed and feel like the bin police have arrived and you're yelling at them for putting the wrong thing in. So it's like, oh, I'm finding this here. Have you got enough bins? Do you know what you're supposed to be doing? And trying to support and educate them and giving them the tools to do the jobs. I mean, they're all grown-ups there. One thing I always say is, staff on a ward, for example, nursing staff, they give injections every day. They use different medication. These are smart people. They know what to do. They don't turn up into a bay and go to a patient and give them the wrong drug, each day. So they can use the right bin, but they know where to get their drugs. They know how to issue them out. They know where they need to go. So we need to do the same with the waste. And a lot of training goes on that front end piece of using the right drug and filling in the right form and how you administer it. But that end disposal piece is sometimes missing from that training element for them, or the focus not there. And if we can get that full loop in, everything works, because wards are rinse and repeat. And once you nail it, they do the same procedure day in, day out, and they know what they're supposed to do. And you can go back there a year or two later and they're following that process down to a T, because they know exactly, right, that needs to go in a sharps container. I need to do it close of point of care, or that can be recycled. It will go here. So you might not just looked at that process and nailed it and trained it. Once you have, they'll just rinse and repeat and they go for it. Theatre's a prime example. Theatre's their military operation. If you tell them where it goes and you've got it signed off and they know exactly what they're doing, they will do it every single day, because that's their bread and butter. They don't start operating, on the whim and going, I'm not sure what we're doing today. And if you nail the back end for disposal, they'll do it. So yeah, I think.
I think just one final thing to add to this. I think we've talked a little bit there. You were talking about monitoring and auditing as well. Right? I think what we tend to do, audit is often a bad word, isn't it? Nobody likes to be audited. You see people going around with clipboards, and everyone suddenly starts getting nervous or thinking that they're being audited to fail, or they're being checked if they're failing or not. I think one thing that we can do is actually flip that and actually look to audit success. The questions around how do we increase staff enthusiasm, staff engagement? Well, if we're auditing for success, we're not trying to pick you up on anything that's wrong. We're here to help. We're here to guide and support and identify where there may be challenges and why there are challenges, not you're doing it wrong against this standard, you need to put it right. And I think how we frame that, just a simple thing of maybe changing the word audit or changing the way that we're approaching these sort of monitoring and auditing and tasks, will actually really have a positive impact on the individuals who are subject to our time and monitoring.
Yes,
great.
A great practical point to end that on and wrap that up on. And I'd like to thank you both for your time today. It's been
you're welcome, Josh.
Incredibly helpful.
Yeah, pleasure.
And then for our viewers, we'd like to thank you for viewing, for taking your time. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions related to what we've discussed today, or if you have any other healthcare waste related queries. You can find more on the subjects that have been discussed on our website at sharpsmart.co.uk. And if you haven't already, don't forget to join our network for healthcare heroes, where as well as getting early access to these webinars, you'll also benefit from other helpful tips and reminders, up-to-date advice and information around compliance, as well as free educational materials and resources to help you make healthcare safer. You'll find any links that you need in the caption, and thank you again.